Welcome back to Shannons Club TV, the show for all motoring enthusiasts to look back on standout cars in Australia. You'll find a huge selection of previous episodes available free on the Shannons Club website, along with the full road and race histories by Mark Oastler and me.
Indeed. Coming up, we'll get some expert advice from the Shannons auctions team and meet a proud owner of our feature car. Right now, let's get rolling with the Nissan sedan, which had some big shoes to fill as successor to the iconic 1600, the Datsun Stanza.
Stanza is an Italian word for standing or stopping place, or even room. In English, it refers to a group of lines of poetry, often wrongly called a verse. In recent decades, some sports commentators have come to refer to a stanza of play. But nobody expected the Datsun Stanza, which in entry-level guise was hardly a poetic car. At least there was poetry in Nissan's intentions. That's because the Stanza was designed as a latter-day version of the 1600, rightly acclaimed as a standout car inspired by the BMW Neue Klasse 1500. The Stanza, which arrived locally near the end of 1978, almost a dozen years after its famous predecessor, had the single overhead camshaft engine and tall gearing, but no independent rear suspension. And its power-to-weight ratio was compromised by the pollution law ADR 27A. The second half of the 1970s was the doldrums for performance. Plenty of 1970s cars sparkled less than their predecessors, perhaps the best examples being the Fiat's 131 and 132 compared with, respectively, the 124 and 125. But Mark, the rally dudes must have quickly seen the Stanza's potential.
Yeah, I mean, given its compact size, it wasn't much bigger than the 1600, relatively lightweight, and the rugged simplicity of its design. It may have had a live rear axle instead of the 1600's IRS, but keep in mind in those days, rally cars, even at World Rally Championship level, were so much closer to the showroom product than they are today. So,
yes.
I believe it's that simplicity and that ruggedness that made it so successful in rallying.
Absolutely. I suspect, though, that the Datsun Stanza was a better car than Wheels made out in a series of negative reviews. Comparisons with the wonderful 1600, and it even used a detoxed, less powerful version of that car's 1.6 litre engine, are finally odious, because the Stanza competed in a lower market sector. It weighed just 905 kilos, maximum power was 75 brake horsepower at 6,000 revs, 0 to 100 took 14 seconds, the standing 400 18.9 and top speed was 156. The Stanza was palpably quicker than its Gemini, Escort and Corolla rivals in a Wheels comparison test. A second strong point is appearance. The Stanza's styling, so reminiscent of the 1600, was pleasing. The 1981 Triple S, brainchild of Datsun Australia product planning boss Howard Marsden, with its Getrag pattern 5-speed gearbox, uprated suspension and alloy wheels, appealed to many keen drivers. Even in 1981, hard to believe, rear-wheel drive was still widely regarded as orthodox, despite the arrival of the Fiat 128, Volkswagen Golf, Mazda 323, Ford Laser and others. I don't know about you, Mark, but I think I'd choose a Stanza over any of those front-wheel drive cars.
Well, with rear-wheel drive, probably so. And I'm sure a lot of rally stars would agree with you too, given the Stanza's phenomenal success in rallying. Nissan, through its Datsun Export brand, produced some fantastic rally cars in the 1960s and 70s, highlighted by the iconic 1600 sedan and the 240 and 260Z cars. However, some might be surprised that the Japanese marque's most successful rally car on a global scale is the humble Stanza. Its long list of achievements is headlined by 6 round victories in the World Rally Championship, which is unmatched by any other Datsun or Nissan model. 4 of those 6 WRC wins were in Africa's notoriously tough Safari Rally, which the unbreakable Stanza, steered by Safari specialist Shekhar Mehta, won an incredible 4 times in a row between 1979 and 1982. This remarkable feat was matched only by Japan's most successful rally car, the Group A Toyota Celica GT4, more than a decade later. As a result, the Stanza is a safari legend in Africa. John, do you think the Stanza deserves greater admiration and respect amongst the Japanese car crowd, given these achievements?
Well, I think it probably does. I mean, you can't even think of a Ford Escort without thinking of motorsport, can you? But same's not true of the Datsun Stanza or the Datsun Bluebird, which did great things in touring car racing.
Yeah,
so I think it does deserve more respect.
It's interesting, isn't it, the crossover, because a lot of car companies, particularly the Escort, that's a prime example where you had a very successful competition program, and that would translate directly to the appeal of the road cars, right down to the fleet models. But in the Nissan line, that didn't seem to work. This Stanza was phenomenally successful in Australian rallying, but I don't think it reflected in the enthusiasm for the car, particularly by what the journos were riding at the time.
Absolutely, and think of the Holden Monaro. People would buy the one with 3 on the tree and the 161 engine. On the back window, it's got driver 500 winner.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
That didn't work for the Stanza owners.
Yeah.
We talked about the Triple S, and the problem with the Triple S was, apart from a 5-speed gearbox, it didn't have any more performance than the standard one.
Exactly.
It should have had a bigger engine. That could have made the difference.
Could well have done, yeah. Australia also provided a unique stage on which the Stanza would star in some of Nissan's most hard-fought victories. The late 1970s is remembered as a golden era of Australian rallying, when factory-backed teams of Stanzas and Ford Escorts engaged in some of the most ferocious forest warfare ever seen. The catalyst for this automotive civil war was multiple Australian rally champ Colin Bond switching from Holden to Ford in 1977, with Bond and Greg Carr campaigning RS Escorts. Their Datsun opponents, ironically led by Ford's former competitions boss Howard Marsden, included George Fury, Ross Dunkerton and Jeff Portman. The competition was intense, the atmosphere electric, and through it all, the Datsun Stanza all but reigned supreme, winning 3 Australian Championship titles in a row between 1979 and 1981, along with 3 consecutive Southern Cross Internationals from 1978 to 1980. On reflection, the Datsun Stanza may not have been designed primarily to compete, but it was certainly bred to win, claiming more WRC, Safari, ARC and Southern Cross victories than any other Datsun or Nissan model. It is, quite simply, one of Japan's greatest rally cars. Remember to join the Shannons Club, where you can connect with other enthusiasts around the country.
My name's Travis McCooey and this is my 1979 Datsun Stanza Coupe. Bought this car off the original owner 5 years ago. It was in the exact same condition that it's in now. I'd never actually seen a coupe in person, so I ended up having a look at it, and as soon as I saw it through the shed, I knew I was going to buy it straight away. Back in 1978, there was a ship on its way to South Africa with 120 Datsun Stanza coupes on it. The ship broke down and Nissan decided that it was cheaper for them to offload and sell them off. A lot of them actually came in lighter creamy colours. This one's more of a tan. The Datsun number plates I've owned for about 3 years. They got offered to me by someone in the Datsun community. It's not often they're going to be up for sale. Honestly, I don't think they'll ever be up for sale again. Out of 120, this one's number 32. It says on the ID plate. This Datsun has a 1.6 litre L16 with a 4-speed. The car pretty much handles exactly as it would have back in 1979. When you drive it, it's like you're taking a step back in time to the 80s. It takes corners really nicely, it feels really nice on the road. It's just such a unique car. Everyone's always looking at it when you drive past. My favourite memory with the car would have to be driving it through the hills, taking corners fast, and just generally enjoying what the car was made for. I've been with Shannons for about 5 years. I think I actually made my account on the way to purchase this car so that it could be insured for the drive home, just completely hassle-free. I know that I'd never find another one, especially in this condition. Love owning it. I don't think I would ever sell it.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Christoph Borabon joins us with a market update on the Datsun Stanza. Welcome.
Hi John,
Welcome, mate. There are some, iconic Datsuns that people like to collect. Datsun 1200, Datsun 1600, Datsun 240Z, 260Z, whatever. Where does the Stanza fit in collectability in the Nissan line?
Good question, that one.
It seems to be a...
Yeah, I mean, we obviously saw a lot of Stanzas around in the 80s and they faded out in the 90s. And today I think we're seeing, a few coming back on the road.
Right.
I think given the appeal of early Japanese cars.
Early Japanese cars, yeah, it's fantastic.
But there's not too many around. I think a lot of them, unfortunately, have probably been destroyed over the years.
The Triple S would be an interesting little car to own now.
I think that's probably the most desirable out of the fleet, I would have thought. Yeah,
it's an interesting car. There was another Howard Marsden special. He was certainly plugged into that, special packs. But the Triple S, out of the three models that were available here, that'd be the one to chase initially, wouldn't it?
I think so, and I think he's trying to find one today. I really can't think of the last time.
I think when I saw it.
Yeah, that's right, correct.
So we had GL, GX,
Yep.
the Triple S, automatic, manual.
Yep.
It's interesting when you look at this car because there was also, somewhere along the line, due to a mix-up with ordering, 120 two-door coupe versions that ended up in Australia. They assembled them, sold them out.
And they got sold.
Now, I've never seen one of those in the skin. I mean, that would have to be, when we're talking about Triple S, you say, okay, but also very collectible in the Stanza line is one of these.
Two doors,
yeah.
Good luck with that.
And I think the reality is a lot of people aren't aware of them, given the small number that came
120.
out.
It's a tiny batch, isn't it?
But that might be an interesting one to try and find, actually.
I wonder whether the person who made the decision got the sack. It's a strange sort of thing to happen, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I think it was it was a popular car with buyers, but it was pretty heavily criticised by motoring journalists at the time, and that probably took the edge off its desirability historically, but maybe over time people are starting to realise when you look at its fantastic competition career.
Who's going to care what Wheels said about it?
Exactly.
Way back then.
So it could be an affordable way into Japanese collectability if you could find a reasonable one.
If you can find a reasonable one, I think a few of them had rust issues in their day. Yeah. A lot of them were really driven into the ground. Yeah. They were used as a second car or
fleet car.
Some of the Datsun 1600s, and yet you still see those around.
Yeah.
Still on I don't know whether people have loved the 1600 much more.
Yes.
But of course that's what the Stanza was based on. It was based on the look of the 1600 and the same sort of concept.
Yeah.
A little compact, punchy little rear drive car.
But it hasn't been embraced in the same way as the 1600.
No. So I think it's always going to be hard to compete with the 1600. I mean, that's had a massive following. Today we're still seeing that as a big following. Again, trying to find a Stanza and something special like a Triple S. Yeah. It's getting harder, but I'm sure there must be some gems out there.
Okay, so when we're trying to dig up gems, the pecking order is the Triple S, which is a beautifully locally developed car, and of course those 120
two-door,
if you could find them. And then we work our way down to the lower models.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Problem, guys.
Thanks, mate.
And remember, you'll find all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own competition image of the Datsun Stanza, visit AutoPix, Australia's most comprehensive motorsport photo archive.
John, it's interesting in wrapping up on the Stanza, reflecting on what we've covered in this program. You look at the criticism, the quite harsh criticism that this car copped at the time from motoring journalists. Do you think, on reflection, that was probably unjustified?
I think it did get a pretty hard time.
I think most of the criticism was based on the fact that Nissan had just been so unadventurous in the car. There was this big expectation, what's the successor to the 1600 going to be? It's come out and it's very, very, very conservative, played it safe, and I think that was the crux of the criticism.
And I suppose also the truth of the matter is because it was so heavily based on the 1600, it probably was criticised simply because it wasn't as good as the 1600 and it came 12 years later or something.
Yeah, as we said, big shoes to fill, and it certainly did.
But it was operating in a different sector of the market.
Was, different time.
Yes. Well, we hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the Datsun Stanza, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV.